Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in this Friday afternoon as we head into the weekend. And as we usually do most Fridays, kick off the show with former state representative, former Deputy Secretary of State, now heads up Stages of Freedom, Ray Rickman, to give his big view.
I think the world is edgy. I think the state's edgy. I think the city of Providence is edgy. I'm going to give you 4 quick stories. This morning I was trying to go into Starbucks and, the opposite. I was trying to leave Starbucks and 2 young men in their 20s wanted to come in and they both yelled at me, "Excuse me," meaning they had a right to come in first. I found it quite strange, the yelling at me, to basically get out of their way and let them into Starbucks so that they could stand in a line with 8 people, and they couldn't really get in anyway because the 8 people stretched all the way to the door. And I thought back that when people with gray hair always got to go first. I thought back to learning as a child. My mother said those coming out get to go first. Now that's still true on the bus and on the airplane and sometimes on the train. But even on the train, I went to Boston the other day and I had trouble getting off the train. The people who wanted to get on got in my way. Edgy. Edgy society in which the rules are collapsing and often gray hair gets you nothing. Always, when I was younger, the woman got to go first when you got to a door. The man let the woman go first. Now, I don't know about absolute traditional rules, but I do know we need some, and I know we need not to be yelling at people because we want to go in the door. A few minutes ago at Stages of Freedom, a gentleman came in. We're having this big 50% off sale this weekend, and a man came in and he had 5 books off the table, and they were all $1 a piece, $10 books probably. And he's all excited about it, and he put them on the counter, and he started looking around, and then he said, "Can I use your bathroom?" And the young man who works with me says, "We're having water pressure problems," meaning, no, you can't use our bathroom. And then quickly said, "You can go across the street to Starbucks." I told him that this morning. Add that in real quick. And he did. And the man said, "You're a liar. Your bathroom's working." Picked the books up and slammed them down on the counter and left. This is a man getting bargains, and he wanted to get angry with us. It's a society on edge. Finally, we have a president of the United States who's closed down 8 departments of government, a fifth of government, because he wants a wall, probably a $70 billion wall. He wants a $5 billion installment. Now, this is a very interesting problem that you would figure out how to get. If Lyndon Johnson were president of the United States, he'd trade something for it. Something worth $20 billion, something that would save 1 million people's young lives. Dreamers, do you hear me? This man in the White House wants his $5 billion so that he can violate his campaign promise. It was 2-part. "I will build a wall." He said it 100 times. He screamed it. And his audiences of thousands railed, "Build the wall!" Then he said, "I will make Mexico pay for it." Mexico isn't going to pay for the wall. He wants us to pay for his $70 billion semi-useless wall. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, I just love that coming off my tongue. Speaker of the House says absolutely not. Today she jokes she'd give him $1. It's an edgy society. He needs to separate his wall from the 800,000 people's lives he's messing with and their families, and all the contractors, federal contractors, and we as the American people were having trouble calling the IRS this morning. Let's have a less edgy world. The 2 20-year-olds who yelled at me this morning at Starbucks, stop it. Stop it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for the Noontime News and Politics Show. Would like to welcome regular Bob Wickham.
Thank you. First of the new year.
First of the new year.
The new year is already feeling old. I'm ready for the next one.
And even though
I don't like odd numbers either.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Oh,
very unsettling.
No, I definitely am like a little
OCD.
OCD.
Only be even numbers.
I'm definitely very OCD like that. So let's agree that we're not keen on 2019. Yeah. Speaking of numbers and speaking of times, it's just after noontime. I believe the Foxy Lady reopened at 11:30 this morning.
A couple of weeks ago, I thought it was closed forever. It is a crime scene, but that's the First Amendment, right? I think the other reason they kept it open is one of the few successful businesses in Rhode Island.
Someone made the point, I
also,
believe.
it's about art, and this is an aesthetic state. We've got RISD here. This is performance art, right? So it's a successful thing, and it's something we have a comparative advantage in, art, and so it's perfect. I think the Foxy Lady should actually be part of RISD.
We do have a lion's share of adult entertainment offerings here in the state. Yeah. But, it was interesting. The thing that the Foxy had raised at the DBR and at Supreme Court, mostly I was at the DBR, was this idea of progressive justice, if you will.
Right.
So they had basically no violations up until this past couple weeks in the solicitation.
But everybody knows some of the stuff that's gone over there. I mean, I know it from my many years of business meetings there.
Well, 11:30 this morning.
Conference center, basically. It's probably Providence's most successful conference center, most profitable one. Anyway.
I wonder if we'll hear any more of it moving forward. It certainly got a lion's share of attention in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it got attention all over New England because it's famous all over New England. I think the whole story will fade for a while. Yeah.
Well, we shall see. I know the DBR said this morning when they issued the stay they need the detail Fridays and Saturday nights and before state holidays. Like apparently before state holidays are.
It's certainly open at religious holidays.
And of course, the Supreme Court said no VIP area. So there's stipulations. So there's maybe a chilling effect over at the.
Very impertinent persons.
Very
importune persons.
Speaking of job numbers and numbers that came out today at the federal level, December up 312,000 jobs.
Employment rate, I think, went up slightly, but that's only because more people looking for a job.
Could be the case.
I think that's it. I think we will have a recession. I think it'll probably start later this year. And I think this is probably about the crest. Just looking at the other things that are going on with the trade war, industrial production is beginning to slip, as though it's a sort of lag time. No, I will not be happy if we have a recession, since I'm living on, especially a recession in the stock market, since I'm basically living on, as most geezers are, living on old investments. So I will not be whatever this does to Trump, but I do think we're at the crest. I think it's going to be downhill.
We'll see what happens.
It'll be like that. There'll be peaks and valleys.
Peaks and valleys in this odd year.
Yeah, quite right. I think we're heading for a recession.
And speaking of numbers and speaking of hospitals, something that you know very intimately. GoLocal had the piece today. Last year, I believe it was when the federal government, there was legislation passed that said hospitals have to disclose the costs.
Right. And
it's nearly impossible.
GoLocal had a good story about that.
It's still impossible.
The other thing, and as I was talking to Josh Fenton a little while ago, this business about, opening up information amongst hospitals and health systems, and opening up, making the information transparent to the doctors who need to know, the nurses and so on, still not happening. It's still very, very thick. You take anybody to the hospital, they're always asking for this information that should be readily available to them, especially in these systems. The case of Lifespan, you've got Rhode Island Hospital, you've got the Miriam and so on. All that information should be immediately available for the treatment of patients there, but it isn't. They seem to keep reinventing the wheel, or not even vetting the wheel at all. So I think it's still a real problem. You know what I'm talking about with Epic, which is the most popular electronic medical record system. Despite that, and it is awkward and all that, it seems to me every time I go into a medical office, a physician group, or a hospital, they still seem to have a great deal of difficulty getting information, even when the information is from other people and other institutions allegedly in their network. So,
well, I'll tell you, I think
data
this
thing,
the data with the cost. I mean, clearly for the hospitals, I mean, they necessarily, inherently don't want to divulge this because it's a market if someone wants to go
also,
shop
I
something.
mean, American is far and away the most expensive healthcare in the world, and it's time that people see this stuff. It's just astronomical. You can't open the door of an ER without getting stuck with about a $5,000 bill for a hangnail.
Have you been in for a hangnail?
Yeah, right. They do outpatient lobotomies now, though. Thank God for that. Yeah.
Let's move on from healthcare. Let's go a little north of the border.
Yeah.
Closing shortly up in Boston is Faneuil Hall Institution, Durgan Park.
Where obese waitresses insult you as they slam down a big plate of Indian pudding, splattering it all over your face. But yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I know restaurants obviously change with the times, but this has been around forever. I mean, it's a
early 19th century, allegedly. I don't know if that's actually true, but there's some sort of sign.
Forever. I mean, do you think that that's just the case, that people don't want this old puritanical Indian pudding? Or?
Well, I think some of it, this sort of heavy, some people would say Yankee cuisine is oxymoron. But I think there's probably a fall off in that. I like a lot of it myself, clam chowder and all this stuff.
Liver and onions.
I don't eat mammal anymore if I can avoid it, so not so much the Yankee pot roast. But I think there's that. I think there are new sort of hipper places in Boston and other cities, including Providence. I think these sort of smaller places. Certainly the rise of East Asian food, especially Southeast Asian food. And then, of course, the fancy French restaurants and Northern Italian restaurants take a lot of people away from the likes of Durgan Park.
Well, don't forget fancy French restaurants. L'Espalier also
that's closed
at the end of December,
too. Some of these institutions are closing.
Going away.
So I think it's a change kind of in taste. Maybe people don't think it's so much fun to sit at a long table and get insulted. I'm not sure.
Well, one has to wonder, is the Union Oyster House the next to go?
I was there actually with occasional GoLocal contributor Jean Lesueur, and it was still very good.
It's a similar aesthetic to Durgan Park, that sort of old Boston colonial feel. You got to wonder.
New England, very New England, kind of heavy food.
Dark, heavy
cold
wood.
Weather food, heavy wood. And I think it's probably just less alluring to millennials.
Well, a lot of feedback when GoLocal posted it. You can see that on GoLocal now.
I think they blame the minimum wage rise too, but I wonder about that.
If it's just the appeal.
I think it's just changing taste. But it's sad. It's the old Boston. There's a wonderful old place. I have to see if it's still open, called Jacob Wurst, which is a German food. I remember the sawdust on the floor. That's along the
Lockover, I believe.
Lockover, that's kaput.
No longer that. Speaking of an old Brahmin institution.
The only place in New England to get Vichy swabs. I still remember that. Very cold soup. That was so revolutionary.
No more Vichy swabs. Let's talk a little bit about what we can expect from you in the column this weekend.
Yeah, I talk a little bit about the Governor Raimondo's speech, which is bland but fine, setting up brand. The important thing is everybody notices the budget speech. The budget determines really what the real initiatives are. She did talk about inclusion, which is nice, but I think that inclusion sort of, let's lift everybody's boat. Inclusion is too diffuse a term. Diversity is too diffuse.
You want specifics.
Yeah, I want specifics. And as everybody said, it's become a cliche. The central thing is improve public education. It's a cliche. But it has to be done. It will take many, many years. We can't get up to Massachusetts anytime soon, partly because Massachusetts is a much richer state. And, much bigger, much richer, but we can start. I also suggest to the governor in this, and I don't think she really addressed, we have an affordable housing problem here.
That we do.
One way to address that is sort of Brian Bishop did in his very long commentary in GoLocal, was to get rid of zoning, or at least change the zoning laws, get away from this obsession with single-family residency, and tolerate more density in some places, more density, and encourage in tax laws and regulatory laws the construction of more multifamily housing in some neighborhoods that are now just single family. And there are a number of things you can do there which I think are very important. The other thing is, one reason the Greater Boston is so prosperous is they have a lot of rail. They have a lot of commuter rail, they have subways. I think Rhode Island, which is still the second most densely populated state in the Union after New Jersey, I think we should start looking to build light rail lines here. Call them trolleys, call them light rail, through the most densely populated areas of the east and west side. We've certainly got a little bit of MBTA service now all the way
I mean,
down
you
there.
talk about maybe
Yeah.
revisiting that trolley car proposal
yeah,
that
yeah,
had been
yeah,
floated
yeah,
maybe
that-
about 4 years or
Right,
so
yeah,
ago.
Yeah. I
Is
think
it-
from around the train station down to the jewelry
And of course,
district.
you're a scholar at heart, and you've looked
Yeah.
at other locations. I guess
Yeah.
they've had some success some places, but they also
They have,
haven't had
yeah.
some success.
Yeah, I mean,
places.
some unlikely places have had a lot of success with light rail. You know, I think Denver, Dallas, you never think of it. What I think makes it particularly attractive in Rhode Island, you still have this, you know, you think of everyone moving to Florida and everything. It's still a very dense population with village centers, town centers. So maybe the best example is the east side of Narragansett Bay. Run a light rail line down through those little towns. So they all have little middles. It's very densely populated. It's perfect for light rail. And you reduce the congestion on the road. Rail is always cheaper in the long run if you figure in maintenance and so on than highways, adding highways, fixing highways. So I really think we should look at this. It'll take some years. This may be a 10-year project. Governor Raimondo will be ex-president then, or ex-commerce secretary, whatever, ex-vice president. But it really, I hope she looks at that. She didn't mention it in her talk. She talked about she talked a lot about education and inclusion and stuff, but I think there are these other big issues that should be addressed.
Well, if you want to read more about it, you can read it on
Yeah.
Sunday with GoLocal columnist Bob Wickham. Anything else you'd like to broach while we
Yeah, I
have you in the
talk
studio?
about J.D. Salinger's the 100th anniversary of his birth, and talk about his resonance still. People still read him. The dialogue is outdated. The time that he wrote about, which is basically the 40s and 50s, 30s, 40s, is outdated, but he still has this engaging voice. And, you know, it said something. It's sort of a time capsule of America 60, 70 years ago.
Well, if you want to read more about it, read it in Bob Wickham's column this
Okay.
weekend on GoLocal. Bob Wickham, thank you
Great.
so much.
Okay, see you soon.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the Noontime News and Politics Show. And we're going to get a little more national with politics with a local native, a regular, Spencer Sullivan, Cumberland native, Bishop Hendricken grad, now taking a new role with Rumble Up, powerful P2P down in D.C. Spencer, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Happy to be on as always, Kate.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time. It seems like the dust has just settled from the last election, but you've made the move from founding lean campaign strategies to a new platform looking ahead at the next election cycle, P2P. Let's talk a little bit about that with this Rumble Up platform, of which you are now the vice president at, and how this could potentially impact 2020.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to join a great team. Peer-to-peer texting, a lot of people probably have already received these text messages. Rumble Up is really at the forefront of what these possibilities can bring, not only to the political world, but the non-political world at the same time. Rumble Up was, I think, highlighted a couple of months ago in New York Times for their work, our work done on campaign technology, and finding ways to deliver messages to voters at the right time, cutting through the clutter of an email, of mail, old-fashioned mail, of radio, of digital, whatever it may be, and delivering a message to a voter that gets read within 3 minutes 90% of the time.
And let's talk a little bit about that, because we saw, as you mentioned, it sort of emerged both in the last and recent elections. And I know up here in Rhode Island, especially in the social media world, we would see ones specifically from the Raimondo camp addressed to folks. And there were kind of some funny memes that were making their way out to social media about folks' responses to things. Now, I don't want you to sort of have to give away the store, the secret sauce, if you will, but what makes the P2P platform successful? What are the elements that the person is responsive and not maybe dismissive?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, the reason why peer-to-peer texting has been so effective in the way Rumble Up does it in a specific way is that consumers, but also voters, are looking for more a personalized approach. I mean, voters and individuals, email is there's a lot of spam, is overcluttered. Same thing with phone calls. It's easy to ignore a phone call. Very tough to ignore a text message, or even harder to not consume that message via the text message, right? So how many times do you get a phone call? How many times do we all get emails that we can ignore and not even consume what the message was? Very difficult with the texting, because as often as we all look at our phone calls on a daily basis, hundreds and hundreds of times a day, very tough to not consume that one text message on our phone. So,
I mean, does Rumble Up allow that capacity then for a true de facto back and forth?
Yeah, so one of the things that we absolutely preach, and one of the things that makes us the most advanced in the arena is it's the personalization, it's the authenticity, it's the conversation, the two-way street back and forth. And when someone actually does respond, there's a live being at the other end of that, right? Okay. So in a very timely manner at the same time. So handling the conversations, contacting, whether it's a voter, a consumer, a client, or stakeholder for the business, or the organization, or the campaign, and making it a genuine, authentic, two-way conversation in which people are craving. I mean, like we live in a very connected world, but also a very disconnected world, because we know when things are just automated or systematic, right, and not really a live person at the other end of the phone.
So let's talk a little bit about that, as I just mentioned, with the dust settling from 2018. How do you envision Rumble Up engaging voters moving towards 2020? Because again, a lot of what we had seen just leading up to 2018 in the general election seemed to be a huge GOTV, basically effort at the end to get out the vote. Is there going to be a real strategy to establish these relationships over the next 2 years? So again, that end user isn't all of a sudden on October 20th getting slammed with text messages being like, well, where were you in 2019?
Exactly. Yes. And one of the best practices that we follow is having real conversations, not only asking for money or not only asking to go vote or donate your time. It's having real two-way conversations with the voter or the consumer. I mean, really moving the person of contact along the ladder of engagement to get them to take the action that you want to take. But that starts with having a conversation. That starts with adding value to their life, to their side of the conversation, and not just constantly removing chips out of a bank, right? So we look at the conversation, we look at the transaction in terms of, if we only are taking money out of the bank, then there's nothing in the bank to take out any longer, right? So we try to keep adding money into the bank with these conversations, with adding value to the individual's life. And then when it's time to move them along the ladder of engagement, whether it's for, I think one of the toughest sells, to be honest with you, is asking people to donate, asking people for someone to vote for you, asking someone to take time out of their life to do that. And Rumble Up was incredibly effective doing that in 2018. We'll continue to do so in 2019. We're also very excited at the same time to bring this to the corporate world. I mean, a lot of organizations are finding a very difficult challenge to contact their clients or consumers without getting ignored, without having that email go to spam or not having that phone call picked up, right? So bringing the innovative ideas that this team has been able to come up with, the solutions, lessons learned, and applying it not only to the political world, but the non-political world at the same time.
So with 2020 already hot and around the corner, and it'll be here before we know it, how do you envision the GOP's chances of success? And let's look specifically at the office of president.
I think there's a track record of when, even if you did lose the House, under President Obama and HW, that there was a re-election. So that, that there's that, right? It's a very, we can talk about the shutdown, we can talk about a lot of things. 2020, even though it's 2 years away, a lot of things can change. So there's no predictions. There's the economy's going well, then something else will be going wrong, right? So we got to figure out where everything stands. But again, too far to tell. And very interested to see all the announcements on the center-left side, the Democrat side, of who's going to actually run or not run.
So what is going to be on your plate then for the next few months as you make, again, that transition from being the campaign candidate consultant to now being a political tech guru, if you will?
Just the transition of introducing, bringing our solutions that we had in the political world, which are very identical to the problems that the corporate world faces in terms of trying to talk to their consumers. Genuine, authentic conversations. Most consumers now expect to be able to text the businesses that they support to streamline their purchasing process. It's especially millennials and Kate. I'm sure there's a lot of folks who get frustrated by how many times they have to go to the checkout box, insert the credit card information, whatever it may be, right? So just streamlining the lessons, streamlining the steps that it takes for a business to meet the consumer's needs, but also the consumer to support that business at the same time.
Well, I certainly hope we can continue to pick your brain both on the political front and, of course, on the political technology front moving forward, because as we know, it's early, but plenty of candidates and pretenders and contenders are looking ahead for 2020. So, Spencer Sullivan, we appreciate your taking the time to Skype in.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Kate.
Okay, thanks. We're going to let Spencer Sullivan go. And that wraps up today's Go Local Live here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We will be back on Monday with Business Monday and Go Local CEO Josh Fenton and more next week. But of course, tune into GoLocalProv.com and find us on Facebook throughout the weekend. I'm Go Local News Editor Kate Nagel.